Hi everyone, it is Maya Lotz from the Energy for Life Wellbeing Practice, and I am your host for the Ocean of Abundance podcast. Welcome to the second episode in the series, Crossing the Ocean of Grief. In this series, I am joined by grief coach and educator Sandy Lotz. In each episode, we look at different aspects and topics related to grief. Before we start, allow me to introduce our grief coach and educator. Sandy started her professional career as a pharmacist in South Africa, her country of birth. In 2003, she relocated with her late husband Tony to the beautiful Monterey Peninsula in California. There, she worked as a pharmacist and obtained credentials as a health and life coach, working with clients part-time. In 2017, with the passing of her husband and then her mother, Sandy became interested in studying grief and the grieving process. After she moved through her grief journey, she became a certified grief coach and educator and the author of Crossing the Ocean of Grief book, a guide on how to save yourself from the depths of despair after losing someone you love. Hi, Sandy. Welcome to today's podcast. And it is a new take, a new approach. Today we thought we'd look at honoring our mum and look at grief from a personal place, which is different for both of us as well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Maya. It's lovely to be online with you. It is early morning in California, and I've got a fireplace going, which I think sounds strange to you being in the Southern Hemisphere. But yeah, I love how we can still collaborate with 10,000 miles between us. I'm happy to be here. Thank you. I lit a little candle for Mom last night. This is something that I took over from the Jewish tradition. So I lit it last night, and she's still burning in the kitchen. And it's simple things like that that gave me connection, honoring her memory. And it's the little things that makes us feel like they are still present in our lives.
Absolutely. I had to count how long ago it was and then realized it was 7 years. And my youngest son, who didn't know mom that well, or the least well of my three sons, when I shared it with him, he said, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like only 2 or 3 years ago. And that just showed me the level of the grieving, as it were, for him, where he's at now. For him, it still feels quite close. So that was interesting.
Right. And maybe being the first experience with a close relative passing away. I can remember our granddad passing away.
Grandpa's passing was huge for me. I suppose that was the first experience we had with a close family member passing away. And also the human being he was. He was one of those grandpas loved by all. It wasn't a family member or in-law who didn't adore him. I think it's appropriate that we mention him because he had a special bond with our mother too, his daughter-in-law. And in some ways they had very similar personalities.
Yeah, absolutely. He came to mind when we were talking about your son, kind of the age thing. Grandpa's passing was significant for all of us because if I'm thinking in terms of the grieving process, we as children looked to the adults around us to see how we're supposed to do this thing called grief. Because we don't teach this to anybody. So we kind of mirror what we see around us. And if you're a child, you're going to go towards looking at the adults in the room. And that's why culturally people have certain ways of grieving, which is interesting for me because I love that we're now talking about loss openly and grief and trauma and stuff like that because we learn from other traditions and the subject gets exposed and we just enhance our education around how we can do grief differently. That people sometimes ask, so what do we do with children? How much do we tell them? I think children do want to be part of some of the tradition. And I'm thinking here you use your adult parental intelligence, for lack of a better word, as what your child would be able to handle, but definitely making them part of the rituals in some shape or form is beneficial. The one thing we don't want to do with children is lie to them. What happened to grandpa? Depending on the age of the child, you don't want to tell a little kid that grandpa went to sleep and didn't wake up. You might have a child that never wants to go to bed again. So you have to be really careful with how you craft what has happened, as close as possible. Tell them the truth, but in a child way of understanding, and as not as much or as little as they need to know. Because we're trying to make sense of life experience, right? And it's also an opportunity for us to do this whole cycle of life. We're so separated from that.
And I also, something else that struck me when I thought about Grandpa was he asked to say goodbye to all of us. I'm so grateful that we had that. And then also with our dad's passing 9 years later, I had final words with Dad. But with Mom, we lost Mom so much earlier. And I think that's something that you particularly felt being so far away.
Right. And so that's the different types of losses. So, how we lose, the loss will shape the grief, is what we say. And so, if you know somebody is a terminal illness, then it doesn't mean that you can prepare yourself for what the emotions you're going to feel, but at least there's warning, right? And you automatically have, like parents and grandparents, have the opportunity to do their final wishes, to say goodbye, to make the phone calls, to write the letters, or make the videos for the kids that stay behind. There's a beautiful tradition to make a little comfort box for people that are going to stay behind. I have a friend who mentioned that she knows her adult children might have difficulty when she passes because we're children. And she is going to make a little comfort box for them so that at different stages of their grief, these could be little touchstones for them almost. And I think that's a beautiful tradition to have if you're planning ahead, because we are all going to pass, right? And if you have kids, now to be talking about Mom, we look for something. And you know what helped me? Is all the millions of little cards that I kept in her handwriting. That's all I had. I didn't have the voice anymore. I couldn't see her anymore, but I had her handwriting. I actually still have many of them. And so I know writing is something that's gone out of fashion, but for those who can still use a pen and paper and have children or loved ones, write something, because handwriting is very unique, and put that into something with a will if you have to, so that they have something tangible of you later on in life. We all want something tangible, but you can make that for yourself if you are not close to the gravesite or close to where the person lived. You can make a replica of that somewhere in your home, around a photograph or a wall with little altars. People do all kinds of very creative things. A bookshelf dedicated to um, a grief box. You put your memorabilia in there, and you take it out when you need to.
Years ago, when I was involved at a community newspaper, a woman published a little booklet basically about getting your affairs in order so that the ones who are in grief don't have to deal with that as well. And I may or may not have shared that story or that experience with our mom. And our mom certainly left all the boxes ticked and all the instructions so clear. The paperwork and all those things was all there already, which she must have done quite some years before she started suffering from dementia.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. I think, Mom was a widow. When you are left behind to do the affairs, get the affairs in order. For those who don't know, if you lose your spouse, the first couple of months is a tremendous amount of paperwork, because you have to get the affairs in order, and you still have maybe a career and children and a life and a lot of other things to keep going. So you learn from that experience, if you're taking care of an estate or involved with an estate, that there are so many pieces and that you wouldn't want to leave that behind necessarily for your loved ones to do, because they're already so distraught to have to deal with and it is the paperwork part, but it's also we start thinking of, maybe I need to edit my life a little bit, meaning my household, so that I don't leave a whole garage full of boxes. So people start to, not everybody, but some of us get that a feeling that I want to lighten the load for them. And this might be the last thing I can do for them, right? To make it easier on them.
When when mom passed, we all had to amend and adjust our wills, and I needed my children to sign documents or give me details and things. And one of my sons in particular was like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. And it's interesting because, as you say, perhaps that gesture of getting your affairs in order will help an individual who, before your passing, is expressing, already don't know how I'm going to deal with it.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest gestures of love, if you think about it. I mean, it's a tough topic. Nobody wants to think of the demise of their parent. Never, ever. But once we've dealt with death, there's only truth. And the truth is, it's part of life, right? And it doesn't take the pain away or the sadness, but it eases the burden and the complications and the miscommunications. First of all, we as must think of our own mortality, which comes up when you lose your last parent, if it hasn't come up before. All of a sudden you realize, I'm the next generation, and what is this ending going to look like? And that is why losing that second parent is a whole different experience than losing your first parent. It's losing the parent and so for me, and it was weird because when mom passed, I was 56, and I felt all of a sudden this, I'm an orphan. I'm an adult orphan now. Even though I'm an adult, but I have no parents. So you kind of wonder, like, where am I in this world? Where am I going to land, right?
Mm.
I felt like I already lost my husband, so I'm a widow, and now I'm an adult orphan as well. So that's it's a very interesting concept to sit with. And these are the people that knew you the best, apart from your siblings. And so it's just an interesting place to be and to rediscover. So a lot of people going through grief have to find a new identity, a new who am I without that? Because for so long you were a mother or a sister or a husband or a wife or a child, somebody's, and now all of a sudden you are still, but not in this world.
Yeah, your identity changes with the passing of someone.
Right.
But it's also interesting because mom lost her speech with her dementia. I mean, you felt it a lot because the phone calls stopped, and at least that was a way of still connecting with her. And my brother and I happened to live near her for a while, so we at least still saw her.
I can remember two specific times actually talking about losing somebody over time. I remember the one time coming to South Africa to visit, and at the end of my vacation, and I had to get back on the plane, I realized she could no longer navigate a phone. So I'll never hear her voice again unless I come and visit her. Okay. As you said, she stopped speaking, so the voice did disappear, but I could still be with her, sit with her if I went to visit. And then the other specific time I remember was actually, I remember the date, 2016. That trip, when I got back on the plane, I realized highly unlikely that I will see her again because
Mm.
I didn't have immediate plans to come back within the next year or two because of my situation here. And having said that, when the day finally arrived, it was so a loss?
I remember waking up before the phone rang, sitting bolt upright, grabbing my phone, and then it rang. And that was our brother calling me to say, Mom's passed. It was the strangest experience. And I also remember something very significant. Perhaps because we'd already lost our mom, and certainly the person we saw, visited, spoke to, there was very little of our mom left. But within 24 hours of mom passing, all three of us connected and we each expressed that we feel her back with us.
Right.
So when she finally passed, it was as if our true mommy was back again.
She was free to be her.
And so I feel, in a way, with mom's passing, it almost the years of dementia, when she became harder and harder to reach, each of us had to deal with it in our own ways. But yes, in some ways, once she passed, I could feel her landing in me again, if that makes any sense.
Right. And that's interesting you mentioned that because, yes, she had dementia, but also in my case, she was far away in distance. And it's almost that when she passed, she was present for me.
I remember once coming across an interview, and the person took a call from somebody who said, my brother's passed away for 5 years already, and I just can't get over his loss. I've tried everything. I feel it's unreasonable, but I am still distraught. And unfortunately, I can't remember who the facilitator of that call was, but the person said to the caller, when someone passes, it's not unlike a family member living abroad or living away from you. At any given moment of the day, you don't know if they are still there. So when someone passes, they've just gone further away, like to another planet, another space. We don't really understand what happens. We have theories depending on our cultures, but it is a way to think of it. And then he made the suggestion that she could still pick up the phone and call him. And I think you have a similar story.
Yes, I do. When Tony passed away, mom was still alive, and you're a child. So my friend was saying to me, "So who do we have to call?" And I went, "I know who I want to call. My mom."
Mm,
And so I made all the other calls, a couple of, but this didn't go away. This feeling I wanted to call my mother. And so one day I'm a very intuitive griever. And so I decided, well, just pick up the phone. Like when we were small and you played with the telephone, that plastic little telephone that everybody had, and pretend that you're making a phone call. So I took my cell phone and I didn't dial a number and I spoke to my mom and I told her, I just wanted to let you know my husband passed away and I understand what you went through with dad. And it was very healing for me just to speak it out into the room. And there was obviously a one-way conversation, but it's an acknowledgement on a different level. And I had to share it with her. And sometimes you have to have a ritual around the sharing. And so for me, the ritual was the phone, because that was how we communicated till we couldn't, right?
yeah. It's interesting, the thing about honoring another. And I'm no scientist, but we get our mitochondria from our mom.
Yeah.
And so I am talking to you, and next to me is a notepad, and it's full of squiggles and twirls and whirls. And I know where I got that from. From my mother. I remember her address book, and whenever she was on a phone call, she would squiggle and make these things. And eventually, one year, her phone book was so messy, and you and I made her a brand new one. But it didn't take long before all the squiggles and wiggles and little things were back on the pristine address book. And the other thing I think of Mom is she always wore sunglasses. Some time ago, I was on the beach and I felt that I'd lost my glasses, but they were actually on my head. And without thinking, I said, "Oh, hello, Mom." So when things happen, and in the first few years, her other thing was losing keys. I went through an obsessive phase about keys, and I actually don't have a thing with keys. But a day or two ago, I thought I'd lost my keys, and I walked up and down the house, and I found them in the door where I'd left them. So small things like that remind me of Mom, and they make me smile. And here I am squiggling with a pen again as I speak, so I feel she's near. And so as time goes, what might feel raw, what might make you burst into tears in the beginning, later on becomes balm. Like the tears are balm for the soul. The things you remember become balm. Mm.
Absolutely. If we do our grief work, which is just mean honoring our emotions and our feelings and then finding ways to console ourselves, we get to the happy memories, which is where we really want to be. Because, like you were saying, we got our mom back after she passed because we can go back to who she really was without watching her deteriorate. And the same goes for when we have grief and we're in deep sorrow, and all you can remember is, the hard and it's difficult and I'm sad. But if we work through that, the pain gets less and the happy memories return. Or maybe the pain never really goes away completely. You'll always miss the person, but there's a place where light comes back into your life. I have a belief that if I stay in the light, if I do what makes me happy, or if I look to good self care, I can access the people that I've lost better than when I stay in the dark. That's how I explain it to myself. So my work is to stay in the light because that's where they are. They're out of this realm of pain and suffering. They are in the light. And so if I want to access that energy, I have to do more of what gets me there, right? And you're right with the scribbling. It's actually a technique we use in grief. If, sometimes we don't know what we feel. We just have all this, I can't even put a name on this feeling. I just feel yuck. One of the best things to do is to take a pencil or a pen and an open piece of paper and to scribble. Think of a lie detector test, that little thing, that little arm that goes up and down. That's really what you're doing. You're just letting the energy in the muscle run its course until it's tired. And then feel the shift in your energy in your body. This is not journaling and making sense of it. This is really just scribbling on papers. Teenagers do it in high school a lot. I remember myself doing it in high school when you listen to a lecture. You've got this energy flowing through you and you don't quite know what to do and you have to sit still and listen to this person and he just goes on and on and on and you just scribble away and it's kind of soothing.
Yeah, and the other thing I remember when Mum passed was I was still helping seasonally in a bakery, and I chose to go to work. But my colleagues knew, word had been sent that my mom had passed. And the owner said to me, "You don't have to be here today." And I said, "No, I have to. It's what my mom would have liked me to do." It's like I needed to go to work that day. That's who she was in a way. Like your beautiful sentence in your book about you could hear Mom say to you when your husband passed. What was your sentence?
Yeah, the morning after Tony's funeral, and that's probably the really where the rubber hits the road for you. And I was waking up thinking, okay, I don't want to get up. I really don't want to get up because I was going to have people come to the house and share condolences with me, and I really didn't have the energy or the desire to get out of bed. And I was curling up into a little ball thinking, I don't want to get up. And then I heard Mom saying, get up, brush your hair, put on some lipstick. You've got guests coming. I could hear it as clear as daylight. And I did. I followed the voice because I didn't have it in me at that point. And I just followed that, and it got me out of bed. What other people think will disturb us might actually be comforting to us in death and in loss. For instance, when we lose a loved one, people aren't sure whether they should talk about them or ask, use their name or anything. So people either avoid even mentioning this person ever again because they don't want to upset us. And I can tell you that 99% of us are more upset when our loved ones aren't being spoken about. Can you imagine if you lose a child and nobody ever mentions your child's name again? It's heartbreaking to lose the child. It's even more heartbreaking if we never mention his name again. When you lose somebody and the things that they had are taken away too quickly, it's almost like we're editing them out. And at some point we are going to do that with the belongings, but I think the person in grief wants to have set the pace of how that should be happening. Like you have 3 sons, and they'll all have a different pace when they are ready to go into the memory box. How long they in the memory box, when they want to let go of the memory box. You know what I'm saying? If you think of your 3 kids, they're all going to grieve differently. And they're all going to need the memory box at a different time in their lives. And it depends on what age they are, what's going on in their life. Some of them are going to hold on to the box for indefinitely. Others are going to systematically reduce, maybe. Somebody might never open that box. And I'm mentioning that because the same thing with packing up somebody's home after losing them. Some people want to clear it out like yesterday. And then they move everything to the garage and it stays there for 8 years or longer. And other people don't want to touch anything for weeks and months to come. It's all good. You know what I mean? There's no right or wrong in grief. There's no blueprint for anybody. Similar to life, I guess. And we have to just find our way through. One thing I want to mention, when I spoke to you, it was in the beginning of January 2018. And so Tony passed in April and Mom passed in December. And you know our history with Christmas being a loaded season with Dad dying 2 days before Christmas on your 18th birthday. And then Mom 3 days after. That whole year of 2017, my focus was on, can I just get through Christmas, right? Then I can breathe again. And then Mom passes away. And I remember we were talking on the phone, and I was so confused because now I had these 2 big losses, and I didn't want to neglect the one grief for the other. That's just my personality type. I was like, what do I do? Do I stop grieving the one and start grieving the other one? Or my logical mind wanted a formula, and there is no. You just feel what comes up and you deal with it. And there's no sequence into who am I grieving today. But one thing I want to say, and I want to thank you for that, because it stayed with me many, many times when it was hard. I guess at some point I didn't have any words, and you were saying to me, you don't need to know. It's okay. It's okay not knowing how to do this. So that is probably something we can give people in grief. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay. Wherever you are, it's okay.
Yeah, but there is no right way. There is no formula, as you say. It's to honor what you are feeling.
Right. We're on this in a social media world these days. When grandpa passed and dad, there was none of that. So that's where you had to look at the people in the room with you as to how to do grief. Now we have so much information, and I love it that we're open about talking about it, but there's a little bit of misinformation there too. I never want anybody to think that there's a one way, or if you're not doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. I think that is the message I want to put out there. There are many ways. So look at everybody's little ideas and then just take what you feel feels right for you. And if it doesn't feel right, then don't do it anymore, right? And this whole thing with giving away personal belongings when the time is right. So, two things. If you are leaving stuff or you're asking somebody, would you like this, especially parents and children, would you like to have this when I die? If they say no, don't take it personally. That's just who they are, right? They don't want the reminders, maybe. But sometimes parents can get upset if the kids don't want their stuff. 99% of the time when we pass on, the kids are going to hold on to some of it for a while and the rest they're going to discard due to practical reasons. Because what do they do with all the stuff, right? And then the other thing I want to say is if it's hard for you to say goodbye, my system of getting rid of some of my husband's stuff was eliminating. I called it editing. And jokes on Tony here. Tony was a shoe guy and a jacket person. And I used to call him Imelda Marcos because he was like in love with shoes. And so I went, okay, I'm going to reduce the amount of shoes until I have only a dozen pairs. And then I'll have half a dozen. And then I'll have 3 pairs until I eventually didn't have any shoes. And that was my way of doing it. And every time I did have to let go of something, it's so painful. You know, their favorite couch, their favorite chair. It's so, so painful. I used to say, thank you for your service. Make somebody else happy now. You know, that type of thing. It felt like if I had gratitude in that activity, then it helped me with the pain on my side. It served a purpose. It made the person happy. It gave them joy. And now I can release that with that energy.
I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say something musical now, like Sweet Home Alabama, or sing The Circle Be Unbroken by and by. Baby, by and by. So Sandy's hubby, Tony, was a blues guitarist and not Imelda Marcos. That was just something else. So that's my memory, and it just shows that the bond that I shared with Tony was music. And my immediate thought was, she's going to talk about the guitar.
No, I still have the guitars.
So do you ever play them?
No, look, this is so funny. I have to tell you this. You know, grief is a very strange thing. First of all, we started off by saying we're going to talk about mom. Then we talked about grandpa and dad, and now we're at Tony. And so that is how grief works. It's a mess. It doesn't come in a system and it doesn't stay in its lane. It's just all over the place. And it's okay. You know, we work our way through that and eventually we find our center again. So I just want to say that.
I think that something that happened for me there was to circle back to our mom. And I think that we three children are all in agreement that mom's greatest gift to us was our love for nature. But what I started thinking of when you listed the people we mentioned there, and obviously there have been other people too, but with each of the people we refer to, I realized that I know exactly where I was when I heard about grandpa's death and mom's mom. And obviously, I knew where I was with dad, and I know where I was with Tony's death. And I know where I was with mom's passing. And it made me think of the phrase sense of place, which in the field of ecology, eco-psychology, in the sense of nature and our belonging, we all need a sense of place. So in some way, that's really beautiful that I know where I was when those special people passed. There's a sense of place that I link that to their memories.
Yeah, I think that can be helpful to come to some form of acceptance too, because there's a groundedness to that. concept, right? I was here and I remember it. I want to say to somebody who's having a hard time with that, because we do remember with by association, right? So here's how triggers can work. Whenever I go past the school, whenever I go past the hospital, whenever I go into a retirement village facility, if that is difficult for me, I do what I call desensitizing. I might revisit it in a different way. If it's completely overwhelming, I'll stay away until I'm stronger, but then I would find a way to edit that association because for some people that can be hard. I was at the yoga studio when this happened, when I got the news. Then we don't want to go back to the yoga studio. You know what I'm saying? But if the yoga studio is an important part of your life, then there might be a way for you to move through that and make a whole new association with it. And that I think speaks more to how adaptable we are to changes. And by association, new, we always think it's going to be different. New is different, and so is, and different could be, I don't want to use the word good or bad, but it could be anything, right? It's just different.
Yeah. And I want to backtrack a tiny bit to something you said just now about grieving and feeling. And I thought, death is part of life, and we are becoming detached, or we edit how we feel. I think it is so important to feel your way. We think there's a right way to live and a wrong way to live, or a right way to grieve or a wrong way to grieve. And life and grieving is all about feeling. What am I feeling? Not my sister, not my brother.
Right. And that speaks to the relationships that are different, right? We have one person, our mom, three siblings, and we have three different relationships with her, all equally important and valid, but we have a different relationship. So when we grieve differently. But I think one way that we can continue to honor mom, now that we're circling back to the how she raised with dad's help. But yes, I have to acknowledge that we were still in need of parenting when dad passed away, and she did that. She was both because there was never another dad for us, right? So she raised us as being free to express who we are. Whether we got it right or not, that's debatable, but you could do your thing. And I think in her memory, or in the memory of both of them, now that they're both gone, to continue that. We are three individual people finding our way, having found our way through this world, and we continue to be that. And yet we are still a family.
And today a thought came to me. We love nature and we spent a lot of time next to the ocean or near the water, in the water. But we didn't sail. But for some reason, the analogy came that dad, in a way, was the body of the boat, solid and structure. And mom was the mainsail. It was like the movement came in a way, or the direction in a way came from. So dad gave us that solid safety, security foundation, I suppose. That's what he worked at. And mom, in a way, set the sail and honored our direction in a way, as you say. Yeah, yeah. Sail to the wind.
Right. I like that analogy of the boat.
I think it was important for him. He too left his affairs in order and he worked so hard. It's like he wanted that solidity to be left behind. And a mom kept setting the sail through our different seasons with the different winds that blew our way. She was always there for us.
Yeah, and kind of an adaptability
Mm.
to whatever is necessary or needed in the moment, which is a great lesson to leave behind, or a great legacy to leave behind. I can go on talking for hours.
I know I can go on talking about mom for hours, and we're way over our time already. But anything in closing that you want to say about grief or about Lynette Charlotte Loss?
Mom had a zest for life. She, I think, taught me to find joy in the mundane. The simplest things can make her chuckle. And that's kind of, I think, the thing that she shared with Grandpa. It didn't
Yeah.
have to be big or planned. I don't know. I still have that. I call it planning for gold in the mundane of the day. You know what I mean? There's this little joy, micro joys. You string those micro joys together, and you have a beautiful day, a beautiful life. Um, yeah, look for the little things and stop and smell the roses. You know, take time out in nature. Be quiet. Those are the values that she left behind. And our brother refers to it, he said that at her memorial service, that she was like a big tree, a big sheltering tree that you can sit under.
Mm. And I agree with you that the small things. I mean, mom was not about stuff. And she was very real and very kind and loving and very accepting. And she would make people feel included in the family, visitors and husbands who came along. I have memories of her with, hanging the washing and being underneath the sheets. And later on, a memory of her playing with one of my babies, or maybe two of my babies, and playing with pigs. She could, yeah, as she says, she was this very responsible, organized woman. But that spark of joy and the joy in the simple things, like with our grandpa, was present. Who he was also quite a serious, responsible guy. But both of them, they never lost their wonder. And that the wonder came from the small things in life, the things close to nature. And that's a beautiful, beautiful gift and legacy to have left behind.
In this day and age where we're so disconnected from the small things, right? We're used to it has to be big and flashy and enormous, and life is what happens in the meantime, between the big things.
Mm.
The small pale days.
Thank you, Sandy, for sharing memories of our own family and our individual ways of grieving and remembering, and also relating it then for our listeners to their own grief processes. And I hope that we get to chat again soon about another topic surrounding grief and the loss of loved one. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Why, thank you, Maya. This was an absolute pleasure to be with you today. I enjoyed our commemoration of Mom and her life and her legacy and all the other people we touched on. And I love how it just flowed from a living conversation as such about death, loss, life. It's all intertwined, and every time you share a little bit more of a story, I think we make a deeper connection with those who have passed and those who are present, and most importantly with ourselves and our own emotions and feelings. And so this was wonderful, and I definitely would look forward to having another discussion with you in the near future, may I say. Thank you for your time, and thanks for putting this together. I appreciate that.
My absolute pleasure. And my page is full of scribble. Top right hand, it says Mom. So this episode is now complete.